Welcome to Kodachi for Three, a bi-weekly podcast where three friends and passionate players discuss the world of Wraith. If you're looking for flesh and blood content, we've got it. Focusing on competitive play, community building, and yes, going off on plenty of tangents. From our favorite casual builds to the market, nothing is off limits. So sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for Kodachi for Three.
All right, welcome. We are your hosts for Kodachi for Three. I'm Adam Roach.
I'm Drayton Gans.
I'm Shay. I'm here.
Okay, I was definitely waiting for more on that one.
You
So
should be a little more enthusiastic, Shay. People like the enthusiasm.
So I did have like a whole actual bit because I've been watching a lot of deep dives on Kingdom Hearts because it's that time of year, and I just decided not to take us down that rabbit hole.
You know what? I'm going to say thank you.
I'm confused, but I will talk to you about that later.
Yeah, we'll get that offline.
Keep it simple and clean.
Because you know what? We did want to keep this episode focused, so we won't have any featured card today. We'll try not to ramble as much as possible. I think there's actually going to be quite a bit to dive into. People have been asking us for tier lists for a while, and we wanted to start that today. So today we're going to be doing a classic constructed tier list as of the November 2021 Pool of Heroes. So that's everything up to Tales of Aria and no current Living Legends bands. So before we do too much, I assume people are going to know what a tier list is. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I'll talk a little bit about our philosophy on placement and how we're going to define each level. So heroes are going to be placed on their overall card pool as they're currently available and include all the potential builds versus just those that are used in the meta, right? So even though if I were to play Katsu today, I would play it aggro style. He does have three very viable builds or three very distinct builds. So we would take all of those into account when building this list. Because of this, we are going to try to place those with more competitive builds higher than those that just have one competitive build because it's easier to counter that hero. So we'll say our S-tier heroes are going to be exceptional. They truly stand above the rest of the pack. They're going to have multiple builds, can or could win in competitive play, no hard counters, be effective, even if you're a less experienced player. So I can pick it up, I can get it played, and do relatively well. An A-tier hero, we said it's very competitive. It can top cut or win a competitive level, but they have more counters or less flexibility than those in the S-tier group. So meta calls and matchups, things like that are going to be a little more important in their final placements. So this could also include heroes that require a really high skill level. Then B tier, still competitive, but less likely to take home a final, especially with any kind of regularity. These heroes have a lot more counters, more reliant on the meta calls again and the matchups than the heroes above them. C tier.
They're more.
Do what?
I was gonna say B tier is low A, high B. Your gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Heroes.
I think gatekeeper heroes is a really good way to refer to that tier. They keep other people honest. They keep the meta from getting too one-sided, but they're probably not going to win out an event.
Yeah, they keep asking you to name 3 bands because you're wearing the T-shirt, and it's come on, man.
Wow, I love that analogy.
That one, that was a good one.
That was excellent. All right, so C tier heroes. That's going to be our low-end stuff. These heroes can win games. They'll definitely win some games, especially in an experienced hand, but they have very little chance of making a top cut at a larger event now, and even less of actually winning. Or they're going to be heroes that have very singular, easily countered builds. D tier, we just think these heroes are poor. They either have a lot of RNG, can't keep up with everybody else. They're bottom of the pack.
They're memes.
They're meme heroes, yeah. You play it if you want to play for fun, but if you're playing that hero, you are playing for fun. All right, well, that is enough of me rambling down that. So we're now going to go down the list of heroes, hero by hero, with each of us saying where we rank those heroes individually. And then we're going to kind of discuss and come to a final decision that incorporates all of our opinions, as long as, somebody hasn't said S and somebody said D, because that's going to be hard for me to do. I'm going to build that tier list live, and then we're going to post that as well as the discussion to our Facebook page and Reddit and a couple other places. So let's get going. Let's go ahead and start out with Azalea here. So I said I was going to read out the card, but I kind of forgot to pull those up, so I can do that now. Azalea has a once per turn action. It's free. It says put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck. If you do, put the top card of your deck face up into your arsenal. If it's an arrow card, it gains Dominate until the end of the turn. It does have Go Again. Like everybody, she has 40 health and 4 intelligence.
I mean, so quite, nice segue. We're talking about D tier and meme heroes and everything. And Azalea's kind of been the poster child of bad meme deck you play because, weird flex on your opponent. That said, she did get some cool tools in Tales of Aria, and she's can actually make things happen. But I don't think tournament viability, I'm not taking Azalea to a tournament unless I'm, wanting to just have some laughs.
Yeah, her big weakness is that her hit effects, while very strong versus some heroes, do absolutely nothing versus others. She's just, for all the hoops she has to jump through to do her big things, they just don't always stick, and I think that's the big problem with her. Lexi just does everything she wants to do better right now, and she's just horrifically inconsistent even on her best days. That's not to say that she won't just hit the gas sometimes and just destroy somebody, but it's very rare, and if she falls behind, she almost has no chance of ever coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all agree here. I rated her a D. Her hero ability, it's a bit unreliable unless you're packing in a ton of opt into the deck. The only other unique things to her, Knock the Death Whistle, Red in the Ledger, they're great cards for specializations, but they're just not enough to push her over the edge. Like you said, she's just empirically worse than Lexi, whose ability is on all the time, or at least much more reliably.
It also comes down to Lexi also is able to leverage New Horizon a lot more. There's multiple ways to build. If you know what Azalea's doing, she kind of has a one trick deck. They flip that hero, you know what you need to do to disrupt it, or just disrespect the deck in general and just outrace it.
Well, I think we can break down to just if we look at there are two big things, which are hit effects and dominate, right? So the types of hit effects and pushing things through. Lexi has way more control over dominate, given that she has a weapon that literally just has it written on it, so she can reliably give things dominate. Azalea does not. She has to kind of luck into the right arrow in the right time to get it. So then she's not even controlling what kind of hit effects she's getting. And then secondly, ice hit effects, even lightning hit effects, I would venture to say, much more aggressive than Azalea's in most cases. I'd rather make you pay one or more for everything you're doing than just one more on your attack. That arrow can also be played in Lexi, so I can double up on them. It's just that type of situation where the consistency just isn't there.
Yeah, no. Honestly, we've talked more about Azalea than really we should have for a tier list.
Yeah, boom, D tier done.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to somebody who is probably just a little bit better than. We'll go ahead and move over to Bolton. Again, Bolton, coming from the last set, he has, if you've charged this turn, attacks you control have +1 while defended by an attack action card, and he has an attack reaction printed on. Banish a card from his soul, target attack with power greater than its base, gains Go Again. Solid hero here.
I have him very firmly in the B tier, personally.
Mm-hmm. That's where I have him too. Not a lot of people play Bolton. If Bolton does Bolton's thing, he wins. He has access to the whole equipment suite and weapon suite from Warrior, which is super cool. There's, you can put a lot of like personal spice on his builds, but like it all kind of boils down to like Lumina Ascension a bunch of times win? Question mark. So like yeah, if you're taking this to like a locals or even like a skirmish, you know, or I guess you wouldn't do it to a skirmish because those are all blitz or that, you know, limited, but like a local kit night or something like that, yeah, you probably take some people by surprise and they'll make the mistake of like blocking your attacks and you'll get wins. You might be able to spike a tournament with Bolton.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, I like Bolton. I did also rate him a B, but I even took him to Nationals this year. I actually thought he had very good play against the field. Now, I picked wrong on the field. He's very favorable into heroes like Prism and Dash, and Bravo to an extent, depending on the build they're taking. But a lot of Bravos have started to adjust in order to fatigue out the deck. So, not having a good weapon for a fatigue matchup and being pretty hand and card hungry for aggro mirrors just doesn't currently position him well. So, I'm with you on the B. I love his equipment suite, like you said. Not a whole lot else to say.
He's an aggro deck who wants to exist in like a mid-range meta. And I thought we were going to shift into more of a mid-range meta, but I don't think we've hit that yet. He could move up as play adjusts, but I don't think he's there currently.
No, he's like a skill check hero.
Yeah.
Like
you said, he's a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
All right.
You know.
Sounds
Speaking
good.
of,
I will go ahead and slot him in at the B tier. Right now, he'll be at the top of it. We'll move those
We'll
around
adjust
as we go.
locations at the end.
So, we are going to move to probably everybody's favorite so far, Bravo Showstopper. He's got an action that costs 2. Until the end of the turn, your attack action cards with cost 3 or greater gain dominate. Go again.
yeah.
I mean, good old reliable
one-
Bravo. Just
No one crushes like Gaston. It makes you discard cards from hand like Gaston. It's
I mean, Bravo, like going to talk about Azalea, which I would then put him at the opposite end of the list. He's actually it'd be the first one we've seen that I would actually put an S tier personally. But he does all the things Azalea wants to do, but then better and more reliably, and then has a backup plan of, oh, I have this hammer and it swings for 6, which Azalea does not have. And his just general consistency and his ability to play both very aggressively and very defensively right now, even with mostly the same cards, I think is what kind of slots him into an S tier for me. You give somebody who's relatively new to the game with Bravo and you say, hey, try and swing the hammer whenever you can and just hit him with big attacks whenever you see him, they're going to do fine. And put it in the hands of somebody who really knows what they're doing, and it can be absolutely devastating. I just think that he's a hero who has a very low barrier to entry, but then a very incredibly high skill cap as well.
I have him at top of A. I just think while he is very consistent, he is very strong. It's a very kind of predictable playstyle in my opinion, and I think some of these decks that are in S tier, if they have a consistent game plan, they can get around Bravo.
Yeah.
See, but you can't really have a game plan for I'm making you discard 2 cards.
It depends on the hero. You can just not have cards left in your hand. So
That's fair.
I've had plenty
but
of Bravos try to tear us under me just to instant cards down to the board, things of that nature as Lexi.
That's fair. And there are things that like let you play around things like that, but then at that point you're still taking damage. Like they still have ways to maneuver around the game plans even if you're trying to counter their play style. And that's what I'm saying. Like in the hands of someone new, Bravo is scary. In the hands of somebody who really knows what they're doing and is able to adapt their play, Bravo is a monster.
Yeah,
and
he's an amazing hero.
that's the thing is that like when you sit down across from a Bravo, you don't know until they flip over their equipment. Are they planning on like really fatiguing me out and I need to have a game plan for that? Or are they planning on going full aggro and I need to not worry about fatigue, otherwise I'm going to lose my consistency and might lose this matchup just from that.
Yeah.
You don't know until they flip over things, until they start playing. And that's one of the scarier things for me. And that's what I think is the big thing that moves him from S or from A to S. Like he has those multiple gambits and he has that thing where like he's withstood the test of time through almost like every single expansion and every single meta, where he's just been a solid all-around hero.
He has indeed been the evergreen version of a hero. If you've played Bravo during almost any meta, you've done relatively well. I had him solidly in A. I agree the addition of Terra Sunder and Tales of Aria has been very, very good for him. It brought a lot of his less favorable matches up due to the card drop. The only thing that really kept him out of S is because dash is still such a huge issue for the deck, and many of the Briar decks are still favorable keeping him out. That being said, Briar being so new, I can see him adapting. But his ability is very solid. Crippling, Crush, and Showtime, both of his specialization, consistently see play. I mean, it's really tough for me. I had him at the top of A. You have him at S. Shay has him at the top of A. I say we flirt with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll leave him at A for now, and we can adjust it as we.
I think he's the king of the gatekeepers in that you have to have a plan for a Bravo deck because you're gonna play a Bravo deck at some point in the tournament, typically.
Absolutely.
Be it, you lose the first 2 rounds and you're playing against a bad Bravo deck in the lower tables, or you've won and you're playing a Bravo deck, at the higher tables.
Speaking of B-named decks that are really, really good.
B-named decks that are very good. Who could you possibly be referring?
Oh, I don't know. If we're just following the alphabet, we might know.
I'm not gonna lie. For some reason, I thought Briar was further down this list.
Well, indeed, you are surprised then.
Speaking of S-tier heroes,
we have
that's how
Briar,
letters work.
coming in with an Essence of Earth and Lightning. Whenever an attack action card you control deals damage to an opposing hero, create an embodiment of Earth. Whenever you play your second non-attack action card, create an embodiment of Lightning. Now, honestly, this hero is just amazing because of those embodiments. The embodiments are very good. It allows her to be efficient, extremely fast and aggressive, while still being deceptively sturdy because of how well she can block due to the embodiment of Earth triggers. She's still new to the meta. I know it hasn't adjusted, but I'd call her a bit overtuned probably. Even US Nationals had her 2 times the rate of the next hero, even though she's new.
I believe at this recording, she has, what is it, like 347 or something Living Legend points already?
Now, I do want to talk about that a little bit. Like, this is your typical red deck wins at the start of a meta type situation. Aggro decks are inherently easier to play than control decks usually, and especially with how harsh we currently punish going to time, the inclusion of sideboarding into the amount of time that you have to play, things of that nature. The decks that are best suited to really keep her in check don't perform well in a competitive environment. If I'm talking about the old Tims, I'm talking about the more tuned to fatigue Bravos, even the more tuned to fatigue dashes. If they aren't playing really exceptionally quickly and keeping their opponent accountable for even the small hesitations of oh, I'm frustrated with this turn, so I want to sit looking at this one card that I know is going to go into Arsenal for a few seconds. Those seconds add up, and this is, not to go on too much of a segment, or segue off to something unrelated, but this is something that a lot of players have extra frustrations with, which is, how do we for slow play? How is tournament length actually the proper amount of time? Things like that. It is something that I think we need to look more into, possibly as a community, of how do we best address some of this stuff. But that's for another, discussion podcast. But it is one of those things because of the current tournament structure, even it helps her, because with these heroes that are meant to be her counters also being new, I think it does position Briar a little bit better in her tuning than we might otherwise see her.
So you think whenever she gets Living Legend here in about 4 to 6 months, what color do you think the next Rune Blade's going to be? I'm hoping for a blue one.
I'm going to try to stick on talking about Briar versus planning our next one. It's hard for me outside of the Hard Frost matchup, which I agree is intended to be her counter, right? and some forms of fatigue. She has very little that can disrupt. So I completely agree she's S. I think we all believe that, right?
Mhm.
And one of the main things I wanted to say is she does have several builds, right? The Earth build is very solid. The cheap generic build is very solid. And the Lightning build that actually runs some blues to play around Lexi is still pretty solid. Sorry.
I like how you're subtly referring to my weird lightning build that
It's amazing. I like it.
I'm fondly calling it my Arcano Briar.
Well, everybody keeps saying, well, we're just going to play Blizzard, and that's going to shut Briar down. It doesn't shut your deck down.
I'm aware. But that's for me to know and other people to find out.
All right, so for now, everybody agree on S, and
Yes.
Shay is still on Blue Bard. Not Blue Bard, Blue Runeblade.
Yeah, I need something like Triceratops. That's pretty cool.
He's going Power Rangers with this.
It is
Anyways,
a deep
moving
Power
on.
Rangers. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Speaking of Runeblades,
Yeah, this one's a little darker in nature. In fact, has been nerfed a few times. Well, at least once. Chain. Bound by the Shadows here. Once per turn action, create a Soul Shackle token. Next Runeblade or Shadow action this turn gains Go Again. And these Soul Shackles let you draw your deck and put them in the Banished Zone.
Yeah, so it turns out even losing, Seeds of Agony, Soul Shackles are still good. Turns out.
well, and I want to talk about this. So I think I'm going to be the differing voice here in that I actually did not put Chain at S. I have him firmly planted in A for a couple reasons. One, he has one build now. He has only one build, and that is the Flock of the Featherwalkers, more generic-y type style because Seeds does not exist anymore. Two, his weakness to fatigue is exceptionally high now. Every Chain player I've talked to during the tournament says they were hoping to dodge Bravos that were fatiguing, or they were hoping that they were going only versus aggro Bravos because they felt like aggro matchups they had it in the bag because chains were still good. Like shackling yourself into oblivion was still good, but you didn't have the big wombo come in for 40 turn at the end that you could just string together if they were just going to hard fatigue you anymore. You couldn't guarantee that. So I personally think that alone bumped him down a peg, but I'm curious to see what you guys think about that.
Where do you have him, Shay?
See, I thought so, but man, those tournament showings are still, he's still good.
But he's good into Briar. So he's good into the hero that's showing up the most. That's a meta call. That's not a verse everything call.
I mean, so I think he has some predators in the environment, and I think a bunch of those are kind of in A tier because unfortunately, if we want to get to trophic levels in food webs, being a secondary consumer is still cool. You don't have to be the top of the food chain. He eats the thing that's at the top of the food chain, though, so he has his own little niche.
Right, but just because he eats the thing at the top of the food chain does not make him also part of the top of the food chain.
Well, when the top of the food chain's 40% of the field,
that's still a meta call. But how we're defining our tier list, we're saying A is meta call heroes. A is not just I dunk on everything. S is I dunk on everything heroes.
All right.
I guess. I don't know.
Let me think here. So I had him rated S. I'm
using you all's logic against you. You guys defined things.
You are convincing me a little bit here. So I want to say this though. Prism and Bravo were the second and third most played heroes at Nationals. Chains stomped those heroes. They wanted to dodge Bravos, but they still beat them pretty consistently. You know what I mean?
But again, we're also talking about people who have been grinding Chain for the last several months.
True.
Versus people who are now having to relearn how to play Fatigue Bravo because Fatigue Bravo did not work for several months.
But an argument can also be made potentially that what Fatigue Bravo needs to counteract Briar and deal with other matchups, maybe Chain is a lower priority, but still a top tier deck.
I'm not saying it's not a top tier deck. I'm not saying it's not basically top of A. I'm saying I think that it has enough counterplay in meta where it will lose matches, and it's not just like, oh, play this deck, expect to win like a nationals level tournament.
Yeah,
like
I think he's bottom.
I think if you master Chain, you will do very well, and you might win. I think if you master Briar, we've seen what kind of happens there, right?
Yeah, I think he's bottom of S. I think you're at what, top of A, Drayton?
I have him actually second top of A personally, but we will get to that with another hero.
I'm torn. I had him in S. I think at worst we have to put him top of A here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of combining them. So let's do that for now, and then let's move to what I expect to be your top of A hero. I could be wrong.
You'll be shocked.
I could be wrong, and I might argue
Let's go.
with you. So we'll see. So Dash is good old solid, consistent, very control-y. You may start the game with a Mechanologist item with cost 2 or less in the arena. I mean, she's one of the most efficient heroes in the game. She's got great blocking. If you let her get to the end game, even if she's only got 3 or 4 blues left in the deck, she can steam along for a lot of turns and close. Access to great equipment. Techlo Core, Spark of Genius, just kind of accelerate her game plan. I mean, the only reason I didn't include her in S is the issue of combo decks, so Bolted and Viscerai, as well as items that can't block, so she's got a little bit of variance if she ends up with a bad hand. What do you guys think?
I put her at mid A, but that just might be as a Katsu main. I actually have done pretty well against dashes historically, so I might also just have kind of a warped sense of that particular hero.
I actually jumped between different locations for her a lot. I currently actually have her kind of middle A, mostly because it's kind of hard for me. Like, I feel like she's kind of like a dark horse right now, if that makes sense. Like, a really well played dash will kind of shock you and might hit you unexpectedly, but I do think it requires a lot more understanding of, like, okay, I'm gonna sideboard this way in this matchup because of how the meta is, not necessarily because of, like, this is what I would normally do versus that deck. It's like you're making a lot of meta calls. You're having to make a lot of, like, very high level tuning choices with the deck. I think it's a deck that when you kind of have a game plan and you're committing to it hard and you're, like, sticking to your guns, and you're able to watch how you need to stick to your guns, in particular in the match, it does very well. But I think when you hand it into the hands of somebody who's less experienced, they will have a lot of situations where they just kind of, like, fall flat on their face and will make more mistakes and just take unnecessary damage to just, like, get an equipment out or something like that. I think it can have a lot of issues with less experience, and that's why it kind of drops lower for me.
I mean, I think honestly it's going to be a similar thing whenever we get to Katsu. So Katsu, Dash, and Kano have the smallest card pools of any hero type. They've yet to get a talented hero. They just kind of have access to their stuff from, their set they came in the game from and from crew. So
I'm going to pause you for a minute, and I would like to mention that Ninja historically will never have the least amount because they have the extra Ira cards. So you're correct, but also, like, Ninja has an little extra tools to help him.
I'm gonna give you a technicality there because there's not
just giving you a small technicality.
Yeah,
but
I'm just
you are
saying,
correct.
Like, in, like, a classic constructed,
they still have those cards.
What extra cards were there?
There were more crew cards that were Ninja than any other class.
Okay, like
the very shallow okay of, like, he got me there.
He's getting you on a technicality, Shay. It is marginal.
Yeah, it's a tech. Yeah, I guess.
I'm getting you on forgetting to make your embodiment. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, we can also... There's a whole nother conversation I can have with the usefulness of a lot of the crew ninja cards.
Touche.
Yeah. Well, they're Debinji. They're all meant
Well,
for
I mean,
him.
we can also say the same thing about some of the equipment for Dash, so...
Yeah. Oof. But,
Some of them are
no,
bad.
basically, I think, totally, mid-A, perfect for Dash. If Mechanologist gets anything in an upcoming set, though, I could see Dash jumping a whole letter rank easily.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're too much in agreement here, so no heavy spice. You guys see what I've got up on the screen right now. I have Dash mid A right behind Bravo, so Chain, Bravo, Dash in A tier right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
So I guess
All
next
right.
we'll talk about a hero that's near and dear to Adam's heart.
I know this is all gonna kind of gut me because I've got to say bad things about her. Dorinthia Iron Song. Once per turn effect, when your weapon attack hits, you may attack an additional time with the weapon this turn. People talk about Dorinthia fanboys a lot, and I'm one of them. I've got a few builds still in mind. I think could put her across some finish lines against a lot of decks. I like playing her, but she's got such a poor matchup versus Bravo and Prism. It effectively hates her out of the meta. She's not ever going to be that great against Briar. She just can't quite keep up. I mean, with minor changes, I could see her making a resurgent, but she's B. She's not B at best.
I have her at mid-tier B. As someone who, for the life of them, can never do his Dorinthia math right and gets gut punched every time, she needs more tools.
I have her at C because I feel like while she can shock the world, most people have that matchup pretty figured out at this point. But that's me personally. Like I can see the B. I hemmed and hawed on this one a lot personally, but I think with having to be prepared for things like Prism, like honestly, like if Prism didn't exist, I think she jumps up a few spots. But I think with Prism existing still, it really, really hurts her viability because as you mentioned, like that matchup is just real rough for her.
It's a disaster. I've tried so many permutations. You can't get positive against the control version of Prism with Dorinthia. I just don't see a way.
I mean, both versions of Prism actually really hurt you because, I mean, Heralds are still an issue for you as well because you really don't want to put in those 6 attacks.
Yeah.
They just slow you down. So, like, even when you're on the upswing, you're slowed down because of 6s being in your hand. When you're on the defensive, like, cool, you can pop it, but are you really swinging back as hard as you want to? And the answer is usually no.
I feel like she's good into Frost. That's the only reason I left her B instead of C. She's pretty efficient.
That's fair. I don't really know how well she plays into those matchups. You would know better than I. If you feel like she kind of still resurges a little bit in the Frosty type meta, then I could see her very well being B. Honestly, I think that like a hyper aggro version of her that's just playing pure value could be actually very effective versus Briar. But that's my 2 cents on it. I think she might be able to race Briar in some instances, but it's still very, very tough matchup.
I think she can still take a winning record at an event. Like, you're not going to make the cut probably with her, but, you know.
So we're probably looking at like bottom
know.
of B right now.
Yeah. I definitely put her in B. Like, she's a mid-table hero.
All right.
All right, well, I'm siding with Shay because I love her.
That's fair. I'll let you have that.
I appreciate it. All right, let's move on to Kano. He's had some interesting placings recently, even at national type events, but it's hard for me. He has a 3-cost instant. Look at the top card of your deck. If it's a non-attack action card, you may banish it. If you do, you may play it this turn as though it were an instant. A lot of his cards are instant as well, but he only has 30 health.
So I probably would have put him in B until Frostbite entered the environment. I think in Classic Constructed now he's C tier. I think you can have a random Kano deck like do really well, but I think it's not the deck, it's more the player.
I lean towards agreeing. I think Frost has really hurt a lot of his matchups now. Like, he did pretty well at Nationals, but we didn't really see a lot of Frost at Nationals, and so, people not being ready for him, he can surprise, like, he's one of those I can shock the world type heroes, right? If you just don't know how to play versus Kano, if you're woefully unprepared for him and you don't have a game plan going into that matchup, if he draws really well, he can just do crazy Kano things. But I agree. I think that Frost throws a big enough wrench in his plan by basically saying hey, you have to decide what you're doing right now at the start of this turn, or it's going to just be abysmally painful for you to do anything. Really hurts his ability to be as effective as he wants to be in some of those matchups.
That all said, though, if you want to pick a hero to an event that everyone will be rooting for you, Kano's a great hero for that.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to see the Kano do well.
Very true, and honestly, I mean, he is a fun hero to play. He's a bit non-interactive, but he's fun. I don't really have anything else to add on his tier. I agree with you. I'm just going to slot him into C. I don't have anything to add.
Worth mentioning as well. Another one of those that, kind of is a victim of a, smaller card pool.
I think it's hard to balance all that arcane damage, but I do think it is a testament to the fact that no one bothers to run Null Rune, and he still isn't having people just pick him up and run rampant into events. Nobody bothers to even try to defend against him. They run
I mean,
a couple.
this is that problem that I was talking about recently with you guys about, draft and sealed with Briar, right? It's that classic problem of what happens when people start learning how to play around arcane damage without arcane barrier. Turns out arcane damage ain't so scary once you figure out how to play around it. People have started figuring out, okay, if I can output this much damage, Kano isn't really a threat. I can outrace him. This, that, and the other thing, especially in Classic Constructed. When people figure out things like that for Limited in Tales, similar thing with Briar. It's a math problem that has to be solved first before it's less scary, right?
Yeah. So, speaking of a hero that has a very, linear, limited playstyle, to another hero that doesn't have that. He has way too many builds. Unfortunately, none of them are super good right now. And that's Katsu.
That is indeed. Once per turn effect, when an attack action card you control hits, you can discard a card with a cost 0. If you do, search your deck for a card with combo, banish it face up, shuffle your deck, and you can play it this turn. I like Katsu.
This one hurt
me. He used to be
me.
the scary guy because, again, like Shay said, he has 50 builds.
This one hurt me as I played a lot of Katsu in Road to Nationals, and I am rather fond of the hero now. I feel like he is in the, to use the improper expression, jack of all trades, master of none. He has a lot of builds that are pretty okay, but none of them really do any of those things the best. He's not the best aggro deck right now. He's not the best mid-range deck right now. He's not the best control deck right now. I just feel like he could do all these things, but there's always somebody who's doing whatever he's trying to do better than him. That's I'm going to probably be, again, the little bit of an outlier saying I put him all the way down to C, just because I feel like anytime I want to go look at a Katsu deck, there's a better option for whatever I'm trying to do, and that's mainly the reason why I just have him so low, is that it's not that I think he's actually a C tier deck, it's just that, man, anytime I'm I should pick up Katsu, I just look at another hero or two who's just doing whatever he's trying to do in that build better. And
so,
yeah,
I'm at top of B. While he is a generalist, you can kind of do whatever you want with them a little bit. The aggro builds still are making cuts in Pro Tour or Pro Quest and all that. So, I think he's...
What quality of cuts, though? Maybe we should talk about that for a minute.
That's for the
Hey,
next
ma-
one, guys.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I think there's a little bit of innovation still happening. Actually, so I don't know. I have him at the top of B. Hopefully, next set that comes through has a ninja, or maybe just has some generic cards, and you can see how they can be incorporated.
He's personally bottom of C for me.
Ooh,
But
bottom
again,
of C.
it's
Oh, come on. He's not going to lose to like a Levia.
I said bottom of C, not D, sir.
Hey now, spoilers.
Again, again, it has to do a lot of that. Like, if I want to play an aggro deck, I'm not particularly looking to be playing Katsu anymore. If I'm looking to play mid range, I'm not particularly looking to play Katsu anymore. If I'm looking to play control, I just feel like there are better control decks than Katsu, even in versus wide control. So it's just one of those things.
He's a very, very consistent deck.
I'm not saying he's not.
Yeah.
But
I'm just saying, I think that consistency is enough to warrant it, being in B. You can take a Katsu and still make a cut.
All right.
You're not going to win, but you can make a good run of it.
Okay, so I really struggle with this one. Bottom of C is a hard sell for me. I had him bottom of B, so I was more pessimistic than Shay, but not quite as harsh as Drayton.
I think he's still better than Bolton.
I mean,
I think
it's
the
hard
OTK
because,
is what pushes Bolton ahead of him, personally.
I
Well,
agree.
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry, I
don't know.
the reason I think he is not C tier is because while I agree with you that if I want to do aggro, mid-range, or control, I pick a different deck, the fact that he can do all of them well still lets him in B. I don't know what I'm sitting across from when I play that deck.
That's completely fair.
Yeah. He also has decent matchups. I still think he's decent in the dash. He's decent into, several other things in A.
I agree.
The aggro deck can, on a good day, race both Chain and Briar.
I mean,
I find one of those very debatable, but
I'm
Chain
gonna
I will
agree
give
with
you.
Chain. I'm not certain on Briar. I'm gonna set out on that one and wait. So I went ahead and put him at the bottom of B.
Yeah.
That
That
is
seems fine
halfway
with
in
me.
between you guys.
Yeah.
Shay, you were top of B. He was bottom of C. We agree that that's reasonable. I would probably put him ahead of Dorinthia. So I'm willing to bump up here as well. Thoughts?
I had Dorinthia ahead of him because I think Dorinthia has better race potential actually than Katsu. In all honesty, if you just go full,
She is by far a better mid-range deck.
I think if you're just going full nose bar aggro, honestly, she might even be more consistent these days than him. Mostly because her armor. She has the ability to just be like, no on this turn and still keep up the aggro pressure. Katsu, if he goes no, I'm gonna block up all my armor, loses a ton of aggro pressure that she just gets to keep.
I still think he's ahead of Dory.
I'm just giving my opinions, right?
Yeah. I think he doesn't have as many auto losses as her.
Oh, for sure.
That is true.
I just don't think he has any auto wins. I think Dory has some matchups that are still pushing towards her favor, especially if she goes into a full aggro build. But
I agree with both of those statements, which does make it hard. I'm gonna leave it here for now. I feel like that kind of blends the two. As we add more things into B, I might shuffle Katsu back around. It's hard when we haven't added everybody yet.
Again, it hurts my soul because I played a lot of Katsu and I love that deck.
I get it. I do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move from Katsu to Levia, and I think we're gonna make this one a quick one. Not a whole lot to say about the Shadowborn Abomination. She's a bit of an abomination in my mind. If a card with a 6 or more power has been put into your banished zone, cards you own lose blood debt. most of the drawbacks of Blood Debt with very little unique benefits for me.
She doesn't have a hero ability that helps her win the game. She has a hero ability that helps her not lose the game, and that's why she will be D tier for me.
Yeah.
I put her at bottom of C because I still think she's better than Azalea.
I have her
She's
ahead of
better than
Azalea, but she's still D for me.
I mean, her specializations also aren't anything to write home about, which kind of is tough. I mean, Doomsday...
Soul Harvest is pretty bad. Doomsday's fine, but
Soul Harvest
Soul
just
Harvest
doesn't really get played.
It's so hard to get off. It's so expensive.
I mean,
Like you not
Doomsday's
only have to
legendary.
have like what is it, 6 resources to play it? Does it cost 6? Soul
It
Harvest.
does. It costs 6.
And then you need to have 6 6-string cards in your discard pile. Which, if you ever have 6 6-string cards in your discard pile, something is going way too right or way too wrong for you in that game.
It requires
So much.
a lot of setup that she doesn't have. For me, her best selling point was honestly that she can use the Carrion Husk.
Yep. Which is what gets her ahead of Azalea. She has
Jay,
better
are you okay
equipment.
with tossing him in D? Because D or bottom of C, Shay? How are we feeling?
I mean, I could see either. I mean, she had a good showing at, what was it? She had like a 9th place showing at some nationals.
Which
It was-
nationals?
It was very small, but she did, yes.
Yeah. So,
We could be being too harsh here. Honestly, we could. Any other arguments in her favor?
Again, I think that she can be like a fine hero, but if we're talking about like there's a lot of factors we're talking about when we're talking about where we're placing these heroes, right? We're talking about giving it to a stranger. How many builds do they have? You know, things of that nature. How good are her like core cards to what she's doing? I mean, not to be that guy, but I'm gonna be the voice of like competitiveness for a minute here and say some of these nationals you could have taken some players, thrown them into it with any deck, and they probably would have done top 8 no matter what. I think that's true. I just do. I think the same thing for some of the Rhodes Nationals that we had this last season. Like, we had skewed results based off how competitive the environment was. So, saying that just because it's a Nationals doesn't mean that it's the most competitive tournament in the world. I'm sorry, different metas exist. They do. There's a big difference between a 414-person tournament that people had to qualify to get into versus an 80-person tournament that people just signed up for. There's a difference.
oh man, Drayton's gonna get all of Europe angry.
I am, and I don't care.
I'm on again. One time want to do a card game podcast where a continent isn't angry at us.
Yeah, guys, I was trying to keep this low key, and then we're just like, some people are bad at the game.
I'm not
Which
saying
part
people
of
are
me
bad at the
agrees.
game. I'm saying some people are better at the game than others.
Oh, well, I was just going to agree with you anyway, so. I don't remember. I think, yeah, it was Portugal's. She got 8th at Portugal. It is a solid deck. I've played a very similar version before.
Oh,
I've
Got
played
that.
versus Levias. I've lost games to Levias. Like, I'm not saying it can't win. I'm saying that it's unlikely to.
oh, I think she also got like a 9th place finish at like UK nationals.
I don't want to talk about UK nationals. I'm sorry, UK, but I don't want to talk about your
Nope.
nationals.
Not, just don't. Okay, for now we're going to leave her top of D. We might pop her up to bottom of C, because you both make good points that I struggle to make decisions.
Yeah.
We
I'm
should
trying
have
to
left
be the
that
good
in
guy.
charge, is what I'm hearing.
Shay is being the good guy here.
Yeah, good guy, Shay.
You know,
It's
Shay,
it's
you
really
are the
hard
good
for me
guy.
to
That's why I have to play the villain.
Yeah, shout out to our European listeners.
It's mostly hard.
I don't hate you.
It's mostly hard for me to side with Drayton because I agreed with his core point, and then he did the insulting part, and like
I
I didn't want to get.
am trying to be objective here. I don't like being this guy. I really don't. People who know me know that I don't like being this guy, but I'm trying to be objective because we're trying to make an objective list. And so I am doing math.
Well, for now, it stayed in D. So,
Well, math.
Lexi Livewire. We will go to Lexi. Also a newcomer, Ice and Lightning. Once per turn action, turn a face-down card in your arsenal face-up. If it's Lightning, you got go again for your next attack. And then if it's Ice, create a Frostbite token under target hero's control.
Yeah, no, I think she's A tier. And I think as time goes on and folks start experimenting more with like the ice control build and even some of the more just kind of real aggro builds with her, I'll be curious to see how those pan out. Because I think both her and Oldhim have, like, if one of them, I don't know which one, is going to have, like, the ice control build that's, like, the optimal one, and that's when they'll get, like, elevated up to S tier. For right now, I have them in mid-A. I think I probably have Lexi ahead of Dash.
I also have Lexi in A. I think that what the thing that's keeping her down right now is mostly people have not figured out the exact balance of attacks, both arrow and non-arrow, to non-attacks in the deck to make it as consistent as humanly possible. It is a fine line. You kind of even see this to some degree with Briar decks. There were some people who had too many non-attacks in their Briar decks and therefore didn't perform as well as they should have. It is something that when I was prepping Briar for Nationals, struggled with for a hot second, and even just like one or two extra attacks versus non-attacks really changes how often you're hitting those bad turns, especially when you play something like Three of a Kind Cry. Shout out to the Lexi player in U.S. Nationals who had that. That was painful to watch, my friend.
It was heartbreaking. I watched it on stream, and as
I did too.
Fairly consistent Lexi player myself, it was pretty sad to see, but it was very well played on his part, and it's not like his opponent was playing poorly. His opponent was also excellent player. So
I drowned my sorrows in Tres Leches cake, so it was okay.
I also had it just above Dash in A tier. I think it has more potentially, meaning I think I might have rated her a bit low. But because of the Ranger problem, you can draw too many or too few arrows. It's a bit easier to fatigue than other decks due to the lack of a weapon. I think mid to low A is reasonable. So
I had her behind Dash personally, but I agree.
Dash.
I had her behind Dash, but I can agree with her being over a Dash, or either direction. But I agree that kind of middle of A-ish area is a pretty good location for her.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we won't belabor that one then. We'll just kind of move on. We're drawing towards the end of this, but we do have another new hero coming up, and he was the hardest one for me to place, honestly. I've played him the least, I've played against him the least, and I think he still has a lot of innovation to be done. So this is going to be Oldhim, our old grandfather of Eternity. People just haven't really come to grips with playing him at an appropriate speed. He is Earth and Ice Essence, once per turn defense reaction, pay 3. If it's Earth, prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt. If it's Ice, attacking hero puts a card from their hand on the top of their deck. You can, of course, pitch an Earth card and an Ice card as long as you don't, pitch a blue first and get both of these effects. He's got a great hero ability.
I had him top of A, very close to S personally, and I think that's because he is the quintessential control deck, as far as I can tell. His literal text on card says slow down aggro decks by forcing them to put an attack on top of the deck. That's not to say there aren't heroes that have counterplay around him. Dorinthia, with all of her attack reactions, comes to mind. But with her being much weaker in the meta right now, I don't think that's as big of a concern. So, yeah, I think just it's his big fallback that keeps him out of S right now for me is honestly just the fact that people haven't figured out how to A, play him efficiently, or B, make sure they're keeping their opponents playing efficiently versus him as well. That time gatekeeper is a big hurdle for him, but I do think he is the best control deck in the meta right now. Maybe not versus other control decks per se. I've heard mixed opinions of how his dash matchup looks, but that being said, I think like versus aggro decks, he has the strongest fatigue game plan and the best way to just like stop what they're trying to do.
I think he's also, I have him in A. I have him behind Dash, just because I don't think the ice deck has been found yet for him, which is like where I think his control build is gonna like find its home. And I think if that ever materializes, he's bottom of S, top of A. But for right now, I have him toward the back of A.
I mean,
So
I think that it's close because, I mean, we did have an ice deck that did win the calling. Granted, that was happening at the same time as U.S. Nationals. But, I mean, somebody had a lot of the game plan figured out, and they played it beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we will say that I am trying to rate them based on where we think their potential is. Main thing I want to ask you both is why is he better than Bravo?
It's the fact that he has so from a control standpoint, and this is like the fact that I don't think he has really an aggro flex. That's actually why I put Bravo ahead of him and put Bravo in S and Oldhim at top of A. Personally, he was actually my top of A over Chain. Is that I think Oldhim has this straight up I will outlast you mentality that is stronger than that of any other of these control fatigue style heroes that exist. That being said, I don't think he has a real good strong other game plan. I don't think he has an aggro build. I know there's like some earth builds that are pretty aggressive, but I don't really feel like that's like a strong build for him. Like, you know, when we're talking about like Briar, where Earth and Lightning both saw very high level play in big tournaments, I don't see Earth Oldhim doing that same thing. I see the more Ice Fatigue style Oldhim doing that type of thing. So, you know, if we're splitting up the builds, I think one of his builds is AS and his other build is more like BC type territory. And so because of that, you know, I think that he has the one build, but it's a build that does that thing very, very well. You know, the fact that you can literally say, oh, like it's kind of almost a discarded card effect on a stick for a defense reaction. That's pretty strong when you're trying to mess with aggro decks game plans, because one card removed from hand is very crippling sometimes for these controlled or these aggro decks. So yeah, that's the big thing for me. I don't necessarily think that he's worse or he's better per se than Bravo, but I think he's better at doing that fatigue game plan than Bravo is.
Yeah, I think he just hasn't been figured out yet. That's kind of why I put him a little bit lower. And I think he's going to be harder to have, like,
mastery of.
Work optimally. Because, like, he kind of has all the elemental heroes to a degree have the issue of the fuse mechanics and to get the most out of their cards. I just think Bravo's easier to pilot, and that's why I have Bravo ahead of him. That said, if and when the degenerate, like, final form of the, like, ice, you don't get to play the game anymore deck comes to life, totally going to be bottom of S.
Okay.
But we don't know if that deck will ever materialize or if it's going to need more support from, like, a supplemental set or something to finally appear.
Well, we will see
So,
that
in our current
January.
card pool...
Maybe. I said we'll
Yeah.
maybe see that in January. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with you then. I had him... Again, I'd really struggled with him, so I don't want to weigh in too much on this one. I had him bouncing around all throughout A and the top of B. So it sounds like middle of A is probably where he should end up being. I put him right behind Bravo for now, just ahead of Lexi.
Other than the mirror in my personal Briar testing, he was also the deck that I had the most trouble with. I'm not saying that like I was like, oh, I'm gonna lose these games, but like it was the one where I was having to like think and adjust my piloting the most, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
As
sense.
it's always been said, frostbite tokens, they turn Briar into Joe Exotic, man.
It,
She's
it
never going to financially
it
recover.
was really more of the defense reaction, honestly. Like that defense reaction is
It's annoying.
surprisingly crippling.
Done at the right time, yeah, it can
Mhm.
absolutely. It can reduce your turn by several damage each time.
Well, I mean, even like the big Sting of Sorcery Ball Lightning turns. I mean, that's one less Ball Lightning that I'm now playing. Do I really want to even have that turn now? Which really hampers that way to clear through the gateway.
Okay. Well, let's move on to a lighter subject. We'll hit up
Ah.
Prism sculpting some arc light for us. Once per turn instant, 2, banish a card from her soul. Create a Spectral Shield token. These are a nice little block and can either do 4 damage or 1, depending on the weapon build you're using.
Yeah, no, I still think she's super like A. She's probably behind Bravo and
I have her top of B.
Oldham.
I
See, I think she's still like outside of like the Guardians. I think she can that Aura Prism build still dismantles stuff.
see. I think people now have enough deck tech to handle Herald builds when they become popular. Like not saying like a surprise Herald build couldn't just like shock the world, but I do think that while her control build is strong into some matches, it's weak into others. I have her very top of B. Like I could see her also bottom of A, but I think she's more of a gatekeeper hero than like necessarily a strong contender. That's not to say that I don't think an expertly played Prism isn't a scary thing, but I think that there's a lot of go again in the meta right now, between our Rune Blades, our Dashes, our Katsus even, our Boltons, that have just really efficient ways to just like plink away her auras at the end of their turn if she's going for that hard aura build. So as long as they're keeping her auras in check, she's not going to be able to build them up, and it's not going to be as an effective strategy as she wants it to be.
Yeah, I can see her at top of B. I think she kind of just like melts to both Briar, Bravo, and Oldham, and
Interesting. All right. So you guys are lower on Prism than I expected. I had her fairly high in the A tier still. Granted, her biggest flaw is that her highest level of competitiveness does typically take an extraordinarily talented player. This is definitely not a deck that we're handing to somebody and they're winning games. So
Right.
keeping our own, well, I wrote it, I guess, so my own logic into account here, I should probably go ahead and back Prism off at least to the bottom of A or the top of B.
I think top of B. Like,
Top of B she is. Though honestly, and I will talk about this a little bit more once we finish up, I do like the way this curve is shaping up for the game. Granted,
Yeah,
we do still see a lot of this S, but this is a pretty healthy meta.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really healthy meta overall. I mean, like, if we just like quickly talk about why I view that, like just from again, like I'm taking a lot of this as a numbers type perspective guy. I do teach math for a living, so that's why I'm taking it as such. But when we looked at the Vegas calling, the hero spread day one was pretty evenly situated. Day two, it was already 50% chain. So we go from an even spread to 50% change. That's a huge jump. And then the top eight was 3/4 chain, if I remember correctly. So, when you're talking about jumps like that in terms of showing, that's a huge number indicator. Now, I'm not saying Briar having a huge representation at U.S. Nationals or these other Nationals and doing so well isn't an indicator of her doing well. That's why we have her at S tier. But it's not as, like, backbreaking as I think the chain setup was. She still has matchups she can lose. She can break out. You just didn't see that really as often with chains, and when they had Seeds of Agony. You just realistically didn't. And so I think that, like, while Briar is maybe a little more tuned than she should be, It is a young meta, and also like I don't think she's as much of a culprit as Chain was.
We'll see.
We will see.
Fair enough. It is hard because she jumped so far up there due to the Living Legend stuff, but that's mostly because, well,
Nationals
she
is
came
worth a
out
lot
right
of
around
points.
Nationals. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's worth a bunch.
Hey, I'm optimistic. I think she's not going to be a problem by the time national season is over. Because of the points.
I definitely think the new set is going to change things a bunch again. Let's move to something a little bit different. Let's talk about our other Brute, and in my opinion, just better version of Brute. Rhino Reckless Rampage, one of the early cards. When you discard a card with 6 or more power during your action phase, Intimidate. Honestly, he was B tier for me, and he was fairly low on the B tier for me. I love that he has a consistent weapon. I love that he can play a longer game. And I like that he's fairly explosive, meaning he can still set up a lot of those Blood Rush Bellow turns. My biggest problem with him is he is still a fairly high variance deck, especially even including his best equipment, Scabskin Leathers, things of that nature. You're rolling dice with your cards, what you get intimidated out of their hands, things of that nature. He's got good cards, he's a solid hero, but there's too much variance for me to put him higher.
Yeah,
I put him in.
I had a middle B mostly because I feel like with, into specifically like Briar, and then we're talking about meta matchups, he does punish not blocking pretty nicely. So I think like he has a pretty decent consistent matchup. I faced Rhinar late day 2 of Nationals, and it was actually a really scary matchup. Really, really close game. Like it was actually the only time I actively chose to go first, because I was like, your turn 0 is just too scary. Because if he gets to just intimidate my whole hand and just hit me for a bunch of free damage, 0 consequences, I just lose. And that's just the thing that he gets to do sometimes. I agree that the high variance is something that weakens his show, but at the same time, I think that like he's actually in a decent spot, I think, into the current meta. But I don't think it is as many people playing him. Excuse me.
I think he's C tier. He's above Kano, but I refuse to respect playing against Rhinar.
Interesting.
See, I tried not to respect him and nearly lost the game, so I refuse not respect him now.
I ain't scared of no brute.
See, the problem is like, so I started to put him middle of B tier in what we've just done here, because that's what I had him in mind as well. But I never lost to him as Drenthia. I never lost to him as Katsu. I never lost to him as Bolton. It's hard for me to rank him above those heroes.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I just feel like I would just straight up beat them. He does have a good matchup into Prism, so
he has a good matchup into Prism. He has a good matchup into Dash. He has a good matchup into those more aggro type heroes who just don't want to block with cards from hand, right? Like that's the thing is like he's bad versus these B list heroes, but he's actually better versus like our upper echelon in irony. Which is why he becomes a meta choice. That's why he's B, right?
Yeah, unless he rolls low, and then he's D tier.
But then if he rolls well, he's S tier. You can always roll 3s. You're an S tier hero.
Or 6s, you mean? But
6s, you know what I mean.
I do. I've played against a brute rolling only 6s.
Hi, Jason.
I've also played
Jason.
Warhammer.
We have also, me and Shay have also played Warhammer, so so that's fair. Okay.
I think he's top of C.
I think he's still B, personally. I think he's a step above Kano. I would say bottom of B.
I'm gonna make Drayton real sad with the next hero.
Are you?
Yeah.
You know what? I'll play with this a little bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit more offline. I think he's probably bottom of B, but maybe top of C here. So we'll move on to our final hero, Drayton's favorite, and
He
Shay's
is my
definitely gonna
favy.
get to go first on this. So
Yeah, Shay, go ahead. You
Drayton's
said you're gonna make me
sit
sad.
back, and he's just gonna listen to why his favorite hero.
Yeah, I just think, like, I don't know. I had him above Kano, but
Can I not spell Viscerai?
It's an S, V-I-S.
That's what I typed the first time. I didn't pull it up, so I was confused. All right, so Viscerai the Runeblood. Whenever you play a Runeblade card, if you have played another non-attack action card this turn, create a Rune Chant token. The hero ability is fine, but his specializations are wonderful. So I'll let Shay talk first. Let's go.
he's the fairest Runeblade. Like, honestly, started out the gate, Runeblade, it's like, wow, this is a really fair class. And as such, he is C tier.
Whoa, that is
C.
definitely a hot take.
Yeah,
C
so
tier.
the
we
thing
check
is...
Purple's fine. Purple's super nice. Purple Ranger, late edition. It's like a dinosaur thing. Pretty cool.
So, I would accept you saying he's B tier, but C, no. I mean, I honestly have him bottom of A because I think he's dark horsing right now. I mean, now granted it was in the hands of Matt Rogers, but he did top 4 the calling at Orlando. I think that he has the mixed gameplays of being able to go for OTK Sonata and also a more aggro game plan that punishes people for not blocking by making tons of free damage through rune chants. And, you know, as we've noticed, hybrid damage is very hard for people to deal with efficiently. So, I had him bottom of A just because I think, again, he's a dark horse. He's the type of deck that when people don't know how to play versus it correctly, it can just take their dreams of making a top 8 and just destroy them. I think that he, in the aggro build, is actually a fairly straightforward to play. It's play your Morbid Skies, play your attack action for the turn, swing your sword, hope your rune chants hit. Like, that's a pretty straightforward game plan. I think, obviously, if you're doing more Sonati type things, he gets a lot harder to play, and I think, like, mastering him is probably harder than a lot of these other heroes that we've mentioned that we're talking about, like, their high level of play. But again, like, I definitely think he's the weakest Runeblade, that's for sure. But he's still my favorite, so.
Fairest.
Fair is
fair.
another way of referring to him. Yes, he is the fairest of the Runeblades.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Fair and balanced.
Indeed, the fairest of the Runeblades. And honestly, fairly balanced. I like him. He got very little out of the new set, but he did get some, and his position in the meta
Reapers
definitely
is pretty good for him.
I agree. I would have had him in C tier with Shay prior to Tales of Aria, but with a little bit of that boost from both the shift in the meta and the equipment additions, I had him middle of B tier. So I was kind of halfway in between you guys. I am not certain how we need to put this in the tier list. So
I think middle of B is fine. I honestly think, and Shay's going to fight me on this, but I honestly think he's a better aggro deck right now than Katsu.
I think I would
Disagree.
fight you on this too.
Yeah.
Mid-range for sure. Aggro,
I would put
he's
him
not efficient enough.
I think we have him.
His rune chant generation with aggro right now actually is like pretty efficient and fairly consistent from what I've seen.
It is consistent.
His problem that Katsu is better at navigating as an aggro deck is into taller defensive decks, which Katsu also can struggle with, and which is why Kodachis are great for him to get around that. But that's where Sonata comes into play, and you say, no, I'm just going to have one big turn that you can't block. And that's what he has that Katsu doesn't have. He has another. He can flex between modes a lot easier than Katsu can.
I think he's worse than Katsu, but he is better than Rhino. Because I had Rhino in C tier as well.
I like how I'm the negative Nancy, for like putting Levia down at D tier, and then like Shay's like, no, all these heroes C tier, but I'm the
Because
negative Nancy.
It's a bell curve. Not everybody can be A tier. It's not a normal distribution.
It can be if your bell is built around A.
Yeah, why would we do that?
Well, currently our bell is very slightly built around B, but it does skew up towards the more competitive, which, again, like I said, is a good sign for the game. We're basically saying there's 15 heroes that exist today, and
all but 3
11
of them are
of them?
playable.
Yeah, only 3 of them are not going to be able to win a tournament. 11 of them sit in A and or B. That's pretty solid. I probably wouldn't take any Bs if I'm trying to win nationals, but even then, you're still looking at 6 choices. Solid.
Yeah, no, those B tier hero though, you can at a pro quest ride them to a top cut.
Absolutely. Yep. ProQuest still completely reasonable. Road to Nationals still completely reasonable. Even then, once the overall meta shakes out from TOA, I think the Bs would be able to make appropriate meta calls in the future. So, are we happy with what we've got here? Do we want to have any summary thoughts?
I'm fine with it, honestly.
Okay.
Yay. We made a thing.
We made a thing, guys.
We did it.
So
We came to a consensus.
Continuing to put our opinions out there. If people disagree with
Man, I
this,
can't wait for the comments for everyone to tell us we're wrong and yell mean things at us.
You know, a lot of people
okay,
just
I'm sure
message
they'll
me,
mostly
which
yell
is
at
the
me.
upsetting part. Yeah, so if you have a problem with Drayton's comments, please post those publicly instead of messaging Adam. I know I post the things on Facebook, but I'm going to give that short disclaimer. The opinions said by Drayton are not always those of Adam and or Shay.
Shout out to our European listeners. I thought the Blue Ranger was cool because that one was Scottish. That's cool. That's European.
All right.
You know what? Sure, I'm gonna make UK even more angry. I am Scottish. I know my clan. Shout out to the Graham clan because they're awesome. Yeah. So
Drayton,
stuff and things.
All right, we have
Drayton,
lost it.
Yeah, I think you're mistaken. Grahams are crackers.
Oh my God.
It's what you use to make a... Nope. You don't use graham crackers to make a gingerbread house. I forgot that that's just something I did because my family was poor.
I can't.
Man, I really wanted to make fun of you, and then you went in there with the sads, and now I can't.
Yeah. It's my greatest defense.
My greatest defense.
Well, we've been Kodachi for 3. Adam, do you want to take us away with where they can follow us and whatnot? So,
yeah, you got to tell them where they can yell at us.
Exactly. So, thanks for listening. We have been Kodachi for 3. As always, we wanted to thank our listeners and the overall Flesh and Blood community for making this a fun, welcoming, and exciting game to be a part of. To keep up with us and or yell at us outside the podcast feed, please find and follow us on Facebook at Kodachi for 3. You'll also be eligible for fun giveaways and more as we move forward. I'm going to post this stuff on Reddit as well, likely the Facebook groups, and we do have a Twitter handle that will also be at Kodachi for 3 very, very soon, so you can tweet angrily at us as well. So as always, this podcast is sponsored by Edmund Unplugged in the Oklahoma area and is the home store of all your hosts. Thanks again for listening, and enjoy playing in the Flesh and Blood.
Thanks for listening and being a part of the Flesh and Blood community. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please share us, leave us a like or a review. If you want to engage with us directly, please find us on Facebook at Kodachi43. And remember, we're available for download on all major podcast providers. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Until then, enjoy playing Flesh and Blood.